Hi everybody. I'm coming to you in full COVID this morning. I did brush my hair, whether it looks like it or not, but didn't do anything else. I don't really care about how I look, honestly, at this particular moment. So the first few days after George Floyd was murdered, I was kind of struck dumb. I am a talker. I talk for a living. I process experiences for a living. And I just couldn't for a few days. And it isn't because I was under any illusions about this stuff being real or happening, or it wasn't that at all. I've had the experience of hearing about and witnessing acts of racism since I was a little kid. So it wasn't that. It was that it was so clear, and people were still arguing. And that really struck me dumb. But it's a few days later, and I have a few things to say, because my practice in life is connection. And so when terrible things happen and people perpetrate terrible things, my gear is trying to understand what could have led to that. That has been a real challenge over the last few years here, because I don't actually want to understand certain things. Nonetheless, here we are. So I think I'm not a special white person. I'm a white person who's been exposed to racism and bias all my life, of course. We all have. And I'm not particularly preset. I don't qualify myself as some different kind of person in any way. But what is true is that I've had some really profound experiences that have led me in a certain direction. And what gives me hope is that that is my only advantage, aside from the obvious privilege of being white. My only advantage is my experiences. Those include a father who worked in civil rights. I know that's no badge of honor, but what it gave me was that he talked about people being people from the time I was born. So that's a real advantage. And it had occasional disadvantages, like when someone beat me up at school, he wanted me to understand why they might have done that. That wasn't an advantage in that moment. It wasn't timely. But as an adult, I value it. Then I grew up and came out as a lesbian and saw how difficult it is to be marginalized, not comparing the two, just saying, having a tiny understanding of marginalization. And I saw that it was so much harder for my friends of color. Then the first woman I fell in love with was Black, and she would call me out about certain biases that I had acquired without my permission. Like once I used this, I was very young, please forgive me. I used the term Indian giver in her hearing, and she said, "Cheryl, that's a racist term, and this is why." She was generous with me. She schooled me and the only reason was love. She didn't know me that. I needed to be schooling myself. So I loved her for a very long time. And then when I was 42, she died. And that taught me, her illness and death taught me an imminent amount about staying with unpleasant experiences, walking myself through unpleasant emotions, fear, a huge desire to run away. Then, a long time after she died, we adopted a child together. I already had 2 children, and they were loved by her. And then we brought a child into our home who was a child of color, and again, witnessing what impacted her as she was growing up, and the complicated prospect of raising her as me after my wife died, who was black. That taught me a lot. And then I fell in love with a Hispanic woman and had numerous experiences, too many to count, and of course with my first wife as well, of me witnessing racism because it happened to them. Here's 2 examples. My first wife, this happened on a weekly basis, in case you're wondering how often. We would go into, let's say we went into a hotel, we were on vacation, and my wife said, I'm going to try and choose the most really mundane example I can think of. My wife would say, could we have some extra soap, to the person behind the counter, the white person behind the counter, and they would turn to me and say, oh, we'll send that right over. That taught me. Then my second wife, the biggest example I can think of is that her sister lives in a bedroom community. We live in Oakland. Her sister lives in a bedroom community, which I am not going to name because it doesn't matter which one. I don't think it's special. We used to own a van. We got a van because we had a little girl and we wanted to take her schoolmates on class trips. You know, the reasons that moms get vans. So we would be driving back from visiting her sister, and more than once pulled over. And they would come, the police would come to the door. She'd always be driving. Don't ask me about that, but she'd always be driving. The police would pull us over. She'd open the window. She had already told me all the things her father did to prepare her for being pulled over by the police. Yes, that is a conversation brown families have as well. And they would come up with, you know, full force, hand on the gun, the whole works. We haven't done anything, we know that. Just got the car tuned up, blah, blah. And they would look in the window and they would see me. And, you know, it could not be true, but it is true, I am white. And they would see me and I looked white. And they would immediately change attitude and then come up with some weird reason they pulled us over that didn't have to do with my wife being a Hispanic person in a van in this bedroom community. So, all that to say, the reason I've come up with, I just have to comfort myself, I'm sorry, for the incredibly horrible behavior, like out and out racism, that's the man who killed George Floyd. Observing it and not seeing it, that's sometimes that. It's sometimes not caring. It's sometimes whatever. But the reason that gives me the most hope is that people who have experiences that change their minds have a better chance, like I have. I've had a better chance to observe things, learn how to look at them, and I'm a curious person. I decided if people can live it, I can watch it. So I've watched things, I've read things, but I had such a head start. What's all this? I mean, it's kind of a hopeless moment. It's just such a terrible moment. And if today is your day to just feel how all the horribleness, turn me off. Go feel the horribleness. But directing this particularly to some random white person who isn't already agreeing with me, expose yourself to some experiences. Like, imagine that George Floyd, imagine that your daughter married George Floyd and they had a baby and you didn't accept them, but you loved your grandchild. And fast forward to the child is, let's say, 5. And the father of your grandchild is murdered. How would you look at that video? That's just one example. I mean, honestly, I wish every child got empathy training in grade school because it is so much more important than reading. Come on, people. But that is not going to happen, especially now when kids are not even going to school. So so many millions of things have happened in my lifetime, and I tend to listen, not speak in these moments, but I just felt that I had to say something, as inadequate as it might be, because the work is mine. The work is, this is not really work for people of color to do. But they don't have any choice. My family has no choice. They have to deal with this shit every day. I don't curse either, but there you have it. I send love, I send peace, I send joy. I bring love, I bring peace, I bring joy. I bring anger, I bring frustration, I bring compassion and empathy. And I just hope I circle back as soon as I can in each occasion like this to love. Thanks for listening.